Before we begin, imagine being alone on an alien jungle planet, surrounded by hunters who think you're prey, only to reveal they're the ones being hunted. If you enjoy stories where humans and their apex beasts turn the tables, make sure to like this video, comment your favorite human X-Predator duo, and subscribe for more HFY sci-fi tales every week. The jungle whispered with shadows under the twin moons of Kravix 7. Pale violet light filtered through twisted claw-shaped trees draped in bioluminescent moss that pulsed faintly, illuminating the skeletal remains of fallen trunks. Somewhere far above, a sleek black scout drone passed with a low hum, its thermal sensors sweeping the ground in silent arcs of searching red. The forest floor was alive with sounds, the skitter of scaled insects, the throaty croak of a nesting ghoul-lock lizard, and deeper within the darkness, the shifting rhythm of large quadruped paws moving with deliberate silence. Dax Heron crouched under a gnarled limb, motionless. His matte gray visor glowed softly around the edges, data streaming in tactical overlays across his right eye, environmental humidity, thermal differentials, movement vectors. Each metric fed his hunter's instincts with silent confirmations. The alien footprints were fresh, three-toed and deep, leading away from his decoy trail. They wanted him walking into the clearing ahead. He could see the obvious tripwires laced with shimmering plasma filaments. Primitive but effective against someone panicking in the dark. He adjusted his breathing to near stillness. The air tasted sharp with fungal spores and ozone residue from plasma rifles fired recently. Dax touched his belt, feeling the comforting weight of his collapsible bow folded against his hip. Beside it, a single carbon shard arrow rested in a magnetic sheath, humming with restrained energy. It wouldn't save him here. Not in the open against what he counted were at least 4 Thraxians. His neurocom implant picked up faint bursts of encrypted chatter in guttural clicks and hisses, their tactical cadence betraying excitement. Target funneled. Heat signature confirmed. Capture alive. Emperor wants him screaming. He allowed himself the faintest smile. Thraxians were relentless reptilian bipeds, twice the mass of an Earthman, armored in natural scale plates and synthetic adaptive suits. They believed humans were primitive deathworlders, useful only as trophies or exotic quarry for their emperor's ceremonial hunts. They never bothered learning what humanity truly forged in the silent dark corners of survival. Dax shifted slightly, letting his shadow stretch across a mossy trunk, and watched it ripple in the faint breeze. His visor flickered as the nearest Thraxian moved within range, decloaking just long enough to send a hand signal to another hidden hunter. Dax noted the plasma net gun braced on its massive shoulder and the curved vibroblade sheath at its waist. Their plan was tight. Predictable. Funnel, subdue, retrieve. He exhaled, feeling a bead of sweat slide down his cheek into his beard. Despite the encirclement, his heartbeat remained calm, deliberate, each thump a reminder of disciplined life. He remembered frostbitten nights training in the Siberian exclusion forests, outwitting predator drones and synthetic wolves bred to mimic alien pursuit packs. Compared to that, these Thraxians felt clumsy. The trees thinned as he stepped forward, revealing a moonlit clearing carpeted with glowing lichen. Each footfall was silent on the soft undergrowth. He walked upright, unhurried, hands slightly raised. It was a deliberate submission, calculated to feed their arrogance. The Thraxians uncloaked one by one, for in total, forming a wide half-circle around him. Their elongated skulls flicked in sharp jerks, eyes vertical and unblinking, tongues tasting the scent of victory. Human Ranger, the largest one, growled in broken galactic basic. Its mandibles clicked around each word with distaste. Drop weapon. Submit. You belong to the Emperor now. Dax tilted his head slightly, studying the speaker's scaled throat where armor segments overlapped at an imperfect angle. He felt the night breeze shift as the ambient noises fell into a tense hush. Somewhere far behind the hunters, the forest canopy rustled, a whisper too deliberate to be mere wind. He let his hands lower to his sides. There was no fear in his posture, only a subtle amusement that rippled through his gaze. He rolled his shoulders slightly, loosening the tension, and offered them a slow nod as if conceding defeat. You boys really should have scanned the shadows first, he said, his voice quiet, almost conversational, as though speaking to curious children who had wandered too close to a sleeping bear. A low growl rumbled from beyond the farthest hunter. It started as a vibration in the earth, deep and primal, before blooming into a throaty resonance that made the Thraxians' head crests flare in instinctive alarm. The one closest to the treeline swung its plasma net gun around, scanning the darkness, but saw nothing except shifting blackness between the gnarled trunks. Then 2 golden eyes opened in the void. They burned with a steady, patient light, unblinking as they fixed upon the Thraxians with predatory stillness. The shadows around those eyes rippled, revealing a sleek silhouette melting out from the dark, muscle, fang and void-black fur so deep it absorbed even the moon's violet glow. A tail flicked once, long and silent, before vanishing again as if the darkness itself recoiled to let it pass. The Thraxians froze. For the first time, their confident neural chatter spiked with static-laced fear. Thermals negative. Visual, shadow distortion. Is it a drone? Confirm. Dax's lips curved in a slow, cold smile. He flexed his fingers near his belt, feeling the magnetic hum of his carbon shard arrow, though he knew he wouldn't need it. Not yet. The golden eyes blinked once. Then the shadow leopard moved. She surged forward without a sound, her paws barely disturbing the mossy ground as her body rippled into lethal motion. One moment there was only night and blinking aliens. The next, the lead Thraxian's throat erupted in a spray of dark arterial mist, his final screech gurgling around massive ivory fangs buried in his scaled neck. The other hunters erupted in panic, plasma net guns firing into the trees as the leopard vanished into the dark, leaving behind only the sound of tearing flesh and bone cracking under an unbreakable bite force. Dax watched calmly, unmoving, as the leader's body collapsed forward with a wet thud, lifeless eyes staring into the lichen glow. He tilted his head upward, gazing at the fractured twin moons. Somewhere above their pale light, he knew the rest of the Thraxian fleet waited, confident that tonight would end with a human ranger delivered in chains. Instead, the hunters in the clearing were already dead, they just didn't know it yet. And as he waited, listening to the shadows come alive with Nyx's silent fury, he felt no pity. Only a cold certainty that soon the rest would follow. Because tonight, on Kravix 7 they were hunting his kind. But dawn would break with only one truth carved in blood across this alien soil. Humans are never prey. Nyx moved like a living shadow torn free from the void. Her sleek black body rippled through the clearing with such silent grace that the plasma net guns fired blindly, spraying bright, sizzling webs that only caught drifting spores and curling moss vines. The Thraxians shouted in fragmented tactical code, switching visual spectrums to infrared and ultraviolet in desperate sweeps. But Nyx's fur absorbed heat as readily as it absorbed light, rendering her invisible to every spectrum they knew. She darted behind the second hunter, her tail flicking once with serpentine elegance before her fangs sank into the soft junction where armored plating met thigh. The Thraxian screamed as arterial blood sprayed in pulsing arcs across the moss. Its plasma net gun clattered to the ground, sizzling against damp roots, as Nyx released her grip and vanished backward into the dark canopy. Dax remained still, his gaze following her movements with a quiet, lethal fondness. 2 years ago he never would have imagined himself here, standing calm amidst slaughter with the most dangerous predator in 3 sectors at his side. But memory flickered unbidden in the back of his mind, pulling him back to the beginning. He remembered the first time he saw her, curled in a crater of churned moon jungle mud, half buried under scorched debris from a crashed alien skiff. She was a cub then, half-starved, her ribs protruding under shadow-black fur matted with drying blood. Most men would have shot her on sight or called orbital pest control for a napalm sweep. Shadow leopards were classified as a Class Red extermination threat, apex predators evolved in near-absolute darkness, hunted to extinction by terrified mining colonies generations ago. But something in her dying golden eyes had stopped him cold. He had knelt by her trembling form, ignoring her feeble attempt to snarl. Blood coated his gloves as he pressed sealant foam into her wounds, whispering softly in old Earth Russian lullabies his mother once sang to calm the household dogs during storms. He remembered her tail curling weakly around his wrist in acceptance before she lost consciousness. The days that followed had been trial by fire. Her instincts screamed to tear him apart, yet her injuries forced submission. Each time he fed her dried meat strips or sponge filters soaked in nutrient serum, she watched him with unblinking intensity, memorizing every nuance of his scent, his heartbeat, his calm. When she could finally stand, she didn't run. She circled him instead, brushing her tail against his legs in the first silent declaration of her acceptance. Back in the clearing, her acceptance manifested in pure annihilation. Nyx reappeared behind the third hunter, claws extended like obsidian blades as she leapt. Her impact crumpled its armored backplate, driving it face-first into the glowing moss with such force that shards of its cracked helmet skittered across the ground. Before it could scream, her jaws clamped around its skull, crushing bone and scale with a wet, final crunch. The last Thraxian turned to run. Dax stepped forward, blocking its path. It raised a trembling net gun, mandibles clacking with panic, but Dax only tilted his head, eyes calm and unblinking. The alien hesitated for a fraction of a second, torn between prey drive instinct and fear. That was all Nyx needed. She landed silently atop its shoulders, her massive paws folding it to the ground as her teeth slid into its neck with surgical precision. Its life ended before it even registered her presence. Silence returned to the clearing, broken only by the rasp of Dax's quiet breath. Nyx lifted her head from the corpse, blood dripping from her muzzle. Her golden eyes found his across the moonlit shadows, and for a moment their gazes locked in a language older than words. She padded forward, her massive body moving without a sound despite her muscular bulk. She stopped an arm's length away, lowering her head until her forehead pressed against his chest. He raised a hand slowly, stroking the velvety fur between her ears, feeling the heat of her body radiating through his armored gloves. "Easy girl," he whispered. "Hunt's not over yet." She purred, a deep rumbling sound that vibrated into his ribcage. Her tail flicked around his waist with possessive warmth before she stepped back, vanishing into the treeline without disturbing a single leaf. Dax crouched beside the largest Thraxian's corpse, retrieving its communication chip from a cracked collar segment. Sliding it into his visor slot, he let the decryption subroutine process the data. Streams of tactical coordinates and encrypted voice orders scrolled across his lens, resolving into a single chilling reality. This was only the first wave. A hunting fleet orbited Kravix 7, deploying multiple capture units across the hemisphere. Humans had been declared exotic apex prey for the Emperor's next ceremonial blood hunt. They intended to take him alive, chained and displayed before they unleashed him in their death arenas. He watched Nyx reappear at the edge of the clearing, licking blood from her muzzle, her eyes glinting with feral intelligence. For a brief moment he felt a flicker of weary amusement at the irony of it all. They believed humans were alone on this planet, vulnerable without their advanced colonies or orbital fleets. They didn't know humans always forged alliances with the impossible. With wolves. With bears. With apex beasts that mirrored the darkness coiled in their own marrow. He rose, sliding his carbon shard arrow into its sheath with a final metallic click. The night had swallowed all sounds again. Overhead, the moons continued their silent journey across the stars. He felt the cold certainty settle deep into his chest, anchoring his resolve like iron. Tomorrow they would come with greater numbers, heavier weapons, scanning drones, armored mechs. They would come expecting to subdue an isolated human ranger. Instead, they would walk into the silent realm of a shadow leopard and her bonded hunter. He met Nyx's gaze as she flicked her tail once in anticipation, her ears flattening in the first subtle sign of savage delight. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, his voice carrying through the empty clearing like a prayer, "we hunt them all." She blinked slowly, then melted into the darkness without a sound, leaving only the memory of golden eyes burning with the promise of death. Dawn broke cold and silent across Kravix 7, washing the jungle canopy in pale gray light. The mossy ground glistened with dew, refracting faint rainbow hues that danced among the roots. Somewhere far overhead, the hunting fleet's shuttles roared through the thinning atmosphere, splitting cloud banks with glowing contrails as they descended toward the surface. Dax crouched atop a blackened ridge, one knee pressed into damp soil, visor pulsing with tactical readouts streaming across his vision. Nyx lay beside him, her tail flicking with silent impatience, golden eyes fixed on the landing zone that flickered red in his HUD overlays. Through the magnification scope, he watched platoons of Thraxian hunters disembark in disciplined formations. Heavy plasma rifles hung from their harnesses, and net guns clacked in rhythmic checks as their clawed fingers tightened over triggers. Small reptilian pursuit hounds sniffed the ground in agitated loops, their forked tongues darting in and out to taste human scent molecules drifting faintly on the chilled breeze. Beside the landing craft, towering mechs unfolded their armored limbs, hydraulic pistons venting steam as they locked into combat stances. Sensor arrays rotated slowly, scanning for thermal or motion anomalies. Dax counted the units. 43 hunters. 2 armored mechs. 5 hounds. A central command team feeding real-time telemetry to orbital command. He exhaled slowly, feeling the tension leave his muscles with each controlled breath. Nyx shifted beside him, ears pricking forward, muscles coiled under shadow-black fur. Her growl vibrated through the ridge stone, too low for Thraxian sensors to detect but clear enough for him to feel in his bones. She was ready. He raised a hand, fingers forming a silent command. Wait. 2 hounds broke away from the group, noses pressed low, weaving along the moss-choked trail leading toward the ridge. Their handlers followed, flicking their mandibles in annoyance as they adjusted their rifles. The hound's scales shifted through dark greens and mottled browns to blend seamlessly with the jungle floor. Dax tracked their progress with clinical focus, adjusting a microdial on his visor to cycle through infrared, ultraviolet and magnetic resonance scans. No drones above them. No snipers. Just an advanced sweep. Nyx's tail flicked against his boot in silent impatience. He rested a hand on her shoulder, feeling the vibrating tension beneath her skin, the stored kinetic fury ready to explode the instant he gave her leave. Her golden eyes never left the approaching Thraxians. She knew the game as well as he did. The first hound reached the ridge base, nose lifting to taste the air. Its handler raised a clawed hand, signaling the others to fan out in search formation. Dax inhaled once, tasting the faint bitter scent of ozone drifting from the mechs below. His bow was strapped across his back, its power cells charged and primed, but here in these close shadows, the weapon he needed had 4 paws and a maw lined with scimitar fangs. He curled his fingers inward. Go. Nyx vanished. One moment she was crouched beside him, muscles vibrating with potential energy, the next she was only drifting blackness sliding down the ridge face. The hound barely had time to whine in confusion before her jaws closed around its spine, crushing vertebrae in a muffled crack. The handler spun in place, plasma rifle rising, but Nyx dropped the corpse and lunged upward, claws tearing through the rifle's barrel before she tackled him to the ground. His scream was short, ending in a wet gurgle as her fangs ripped through his throat. The second hound bolted sideways, yelping with sudden fear. Nyx released her kill, pivoted and pounced. Her massive paws slammed it into the moss with bone-breaking force, and her jaws snapped shut around its skull with a final decisive crunch. Silence returned to the ridge, broken only by the drip of blood pattering onto fungal blossoms below. Dax rose smoothly, sliding down the ridge to join her. She lifted her head, muzzle slick with blood, eyes flicking toward the distant landing zone where confusion had begun to spread among the Thraxian ranks. Their comms flickered in encrypted panic, tactical formation orders cross-chattering with environmental hazard alerts as they tried to locate their missing scouts. He knelt beside Nyx, wiping a smear of blood from her whiskers with his gloved thumb. She closed her eyes briefly, pressing into his touch, then turned back to the prey below with renewed focus. They moved through the undergrowth like specters. Dax's footfalls were silent on the moss-carpeted ground, his visor dimmed to maximum shadow filtration, rendering the jungle in crisp outlines of movement and heat signatures. Nyx weaved through shadows ahead of him, her body merging with the darkness so completely that even he could not see her at times. Only the faint scent of ozone and warm blood marked her passing. They reached the outer perimeter guard, 3 hunters fanned out in standard staggered triangle formation. Dax studied their stances, reading the tilt of their rifles, the flicker of their HUD lens overlays. He fitted a carbon shard arrow into his bowstring, feeling the magnetic lock hum as the targeting reticle synced with his neural implant. A flick of his left index finger activated silent mode, damping the arrow's release to a faint whisper. He exhaled. The arrow punched through the lead hunter's eye socket with a muffled crunch, emerging from the back of its skull in a spray of greenish-black blood. Before the other 2 could react, Nyx lunged from the shadows, claws flashing in a blur of killing strokes that shredded synthetic armor like dried grass. Their bodies fell in silent ruin upon the moss, steaming faintly in the cool morning air. Dax retrieved his arrow, wiping the viscous residue onto a fern's broad leaf before returning it to its magnetic sheath. He glanced toward the central clearing where the armored mechs stomped forward in coordinated patrol arcs. Their head-mounted plasma cannons swept the treelines in slow, precise scans, projecting ultraviolet pulses to scatter hidden shapes. Nyx crouched beside him, her ears flattening as she studied their lumbering gait, the hiss of hydraulic pistons, the faint electronic whine with each armored step. She growled softly, barely audible even to him. He rested his hand against her shoulder again, feeling the tremor of primal fury coiling through her muscles like a drawn bowstring. His gaze tracked the mech's scanning interval, mapping each blind spot as it rotated. They waited. A Thraxian hunter, larger than the others and draped in dark command sigils, emerged from the rear lines. Its mandibles flared wide as it shouted tactical orders in a guttural snarl. Its heavy command staff clanged against the mech's armored leg, directing its cannons toward the ridge. Dax flicked his visor overlay, zooming onto the command staff's embedded transmitter node. 1 arrow would sever it. 2 would end the command chain entirely. He loaded the first arrow, drawing back with silent precision. Nyx crouched lower, eyes fixed on the command leader's throat. The air between them shimmered faintly with rising jungle humidity. Somewhere far behind them, the twin suns broke the horizon, washing the forest in burning gold. Dax released. The arrow tore through the staff's emitter node, shattering it in a flare of sparking shards. The command leader staggered backward, mandibles clacking in confusion as its HUD flickered into static. The mech hesitated mid-step, its targeting array glitching under sudden command loss. Nyx surged forward, crossing 20 meters in 3 silent bounds. She launched herself upward, claws flashing as she raked across the mech's optic sensors, scoring deep furrows in its armored faceplate. The massive cannon pivoted upward, firing blindly into the treetops as Nyx darted under its chassis, claws ripping into exposed hydraulic cables. The command leader roared in rage, raising its plasma pistol toward Dax, but he was already moving. His second arrow slammed into its throat, embedding deep with a metallic crunch. It fell to its knees, gurgling wetly as blood frothed between its mandibles. Nyx reappeared at his side, panting softly, blood dripping from her jaws and claws. They stood together amid the chaos, the mech collapsing behind them in a shuddering crash as smoke billowed from its severed cables. The remaining Thraxians scrambled to reassemble ranks, shouting in panic as tactical data streams failed one by one. Above them, the sky filled with the rising hum of inbound drones and orbital dropships descending through the dawn light. Dax rested his hand on Nyx's head, feeling her fur bristle under his touch. Her golden eyes met his, unblinking and wild with the silent promise of what was to come. This was only their vanguard, he murmured, his voice calm despite the looming storm. Now we show them what real hunters look like. She flicked her tail once, tasting the blood-soaked air with satisfaction, then turned back to face the approaching army. The jungle around them vibrated with distant rotor thrums and screeching pursuit drones diving from orbit. Dawn had come, but its light did not promise salvation. Only the cold certainty of slaughter yet to unfold. The jungle vibrated with the low hum of approaching drones, their sleek black forms slicing through the dawn mist. Beneath the drifting spores and dappled beams of pale gold, Dax moved with a quiet deliberation born of exhaustion and certainty. His every step was purposeful, eyes scanning the terrain while Nyx flowed beside him, her paws leaving no trace on the moss-choked ground. They had been hunting for hours, weaving in and out of Thraxian patrol lines, leaving broken bodies and blood-smeared lichen in their silent wake. Ahead lay the command clearing, a wide depression ringed with crushed fern stalks and scorched tree stumps where plasma blasts had burned away vegetation. Thraxian mechs loomed in staggered defensive arcs, their cannons tracking each shadow. Drones flickered overhead in precise rotations, ultraviolet pulses scanning for thermal or molecular anomalies. And at the clearing's center stood a creature unlike any they had yet faced. The Thraxian High Warden towered over its subordinates, armored in ornate plates etched with hunting sigils and emperor's glyphs. 4 clawed arms rested at its sides, each sheathed in scaled gauntlets layered with reactive energy shielding. Its mandibles flared outward, tasting the wind with regal disdain. Its primary eyes scanned data streams from drones and units in rapid flickers, while its secondary eyes remained fixed on the jungle's silent shadows. Dax crouched behind a fallen tree trunk, feeling its cold, damp bark press against his palms. Nyx lay coiled beside him, her ears pinned low, golden eyes burning with an intensity that pulsed in time with his own quickening heartbeats. He watched her chest expand and contract with controlled breaths, each inhale silent as the dawn wind, each exhale trembling with stored fury. His visor flickered with tactical overlays as he assessed the clearing's defenses. Plasma mines laced the entrance trails. Thermal tripwires webbed the ground at random intervals. Sensor drones drifted in disciplined patrol arcs above, their cameras swiveling in search of movement. Every avenue of approach was a kill zone. It was perfect. He tapped Nyx's flank gently, feeling the rippling tension in her muscles. Her head turned slightly, golden eyes locking onto his. For a long moment they remained motionless, 2 predators sharing a silent communion beneath the whispering jungle canopy. Memories flooded his mind, of finding her half dead and broken, of nights spent tending her wounds under alien stars, of the first time she let him touch her muzzle without baring her fangs. She was not his pet. She was not his weapon. She was his equal, forged from darkness and hunger, tempered by pain and survival. They understood each other in a language older than any civilization, a language written in blood and shadows and quiet trust. Together they were something more than human, more than predator. They were the silent promise of extinction to any who mistook them for prey. He raised 2 fingers. Wait. The High Warden's mandibles clicked in irritation as it barked orders to its units, its voice booming through the clearing's external amplifiers. Hunters moved to reinforce the western perimeter. Mechs adjusted their firing vectors, cannons swiveling to track decoy movements triggered by his sabotage charges earlier in the hunt. The Warden's eyes narrowed, scanning for a threat it could sense but not see. Nyx lowered her head, tail curling inward in disciplined readiness. Dax reached for his carbon shard arrow, feeling its magnetic hum as it locked into place along his bowstring. His targeting reticle synced instantly, highlighting the Warden's exposed submandibular node beneath its chest armor plates. He drew a long, silent breath, feeling the bowstring creak against his gauntlet fingers. The world narrowed to a single point of tension between his heartbeat and the arrow's vector. He released. The arrow streaked forward in a silent blur, slamming into the Warden's node with a wet, cracking thud. The creature roared in pain, its upper arms clawing at the embedded shaft as blue-black ichor spilled down its armored chest. The clearing erupted into chaos as drones shrieked alarms and hunters converged toward the ridge. Nyx moved before the echoes faded. She surged from cover with terrifying speed, her black form a streak of shifting shadows as she crossed the open ground. Plasma bolts seared past her, leaving shimmering afterimages against her void-black fur. She zigzagged in an unnatural blur of feline motion, closing the distance to the nearest hunter in a single bound. Her claws tore through his torso armor, sending his internal organs spilling across the moss in steaming loops. Dax rose from cover, knocking another arrow in a single smooth motion. He fired into the chest plate of an approaching mech pilot, the kinetic impact knocking it backward into its own tripwire field. Plasma mines detonated in a rolling wave of blue fire, engulfing 3 hunters and their hounds in crackling arcs of vaporized flesh and molten bone. The Warden staggered upright, wrenching the arrow free with a howl of rage. It raised one of its clawed arms, activating a shimmering energy shield as it scanned for the source of its injury. Nyx launched herself at its side, claws raking deep gouges across its armored hip joint. The Warden swung its massive fist downward, but she slipped beneath the blow, jaws snapping shut around its exposed wrist. There was a splintering crack as she bit through alien bone and tendons, her growl vibrating against its flesh. It roared and kicked her away with a brutal knee strike that sent her sprawling across the moss. Dax's heart clenched as he saw her skid to a halt, her ribs heaving with ragged breaths. Blood trickled from a gash along her flank where armored plating had sliced deep. But her golden eyes burned with defiance as she rose, slow and deliberate, her ears pinned flat against her skull. The Warden staggered forward, ichor dripping from its severed wrist. It raised its other claws in a brutal hammer strike, but Dax was already moving. He sprinted from the treeline, sliding under its outstretched arm as his hand reached for the vibroblade strapped to his thigh. The blade sang with a high-pitched hum as he activated its monomolecular edge. He rose behind the Warden, driving the blade upward between its back armor plates with all the force his muscles could muster. The blade pierced through its chest, emerging in a spray of blue-black blood and shattered internal plating. The Warden convulsed, its scream cut off as Nyx leapt onto its chest from the front, claws sinking into its exposed throat. Together they bore it backward, forcing it to the mossy ground with a bone-shaking thud. Its limbs twitched once, then fell still, its multiple eyes staring lifeless into the dawn sky. For a moment, silence reigned across the clearing. Smoke drifted from burning foliage where plasma bolts had scorched the ground. Broken mechs lay collapsed in twisted heaps of sparking metal. The remaining hunters scrambled to retreat toward their shuttles, screaming into malfunctioning comms as sensor drones crashed to the earth in showers of broken optics and flickering lights. Dax rested a hand on Nyx's blood-slicked fur, feeling her rapid heartbeat thunder beneath his palm. Her breathing was ragged but strong. She turned her head slightly, pressing her muzzle against his chest with a quiet, exhausted whine. He buried his fingers into her thick fur, pressing his forehead against hers. In that silent contact, beneath the drifting jungle mist and rising embers, was a bond no empire could break. He rose slowly, drawing his bow once more as he surveyed the fleeing Thraxians. His eyes narrowed with the cold clarity of a man who had endured too many hunts to mistake mercy for victory. Nyx stepped forward, her tail curling with predatory grace as she bared her fangs in a silent snarl. He rested his hand lightly against her flank. Let none escape. She leapt forward, vanishing into the drifting shadows with only the flick of her tail marking her passage. Screams echoed through the jungle as she hunted them down one by one, each cry cut short with savage finality. Dax watched her silhouette dance through the rising smoke and dawn light, a creature forged of darkness and vengeance. Above them, the Thraxian fleet began its slow retreat, orbital thrusters igniting with silent fury as they abandoned their failed hunt. Dax lowered his bow, feeling the tremble in his arms subside as adrenaline faded to weary calm. The jungle around him breathed with quiet reverence, shadows shifting as if bowing to the apex predators who ruled them once more. Nyx reappeared at his side, her muzzle flecked with blood, her golden eyes finding his with silent triumph. She pressed her head against his hip, and he laid his hand atop her skull, feeling her warmth, her power, her quiet, unwavering trust. Together they turned and walked into the shadows of the waking jungle. The suns rose behind them, illuminating a blood-soaked clearing that bore silent testament to the folly of those who believed Earth's children could ever be hunted. For in the end it was not the alien hunters who ruled this world. It was the human and his shadow. And in their wake only silence remained,